Hey everybody, I'm going to do the Chapter 3 pre-studio to prep you for Chapter 3's studio here, and here's the problem statement for the Chapter 3 pre-studio. The idea is that Brexit vote is going to be this week. This is recording this on June 22nd, and Great Britain is going to vote on whether or not they want to recommend to Parliament that the country or that Great Britain leaves the European Union. So the idea is that we're going to build a calculator of sorts for this specific purpose. So the idea is that there's going to be a boom in the sale of souvenir UK flags after the vote. People are going to be feeling very patriotic, so you're going to take advantage of that. You have a small flag business in the United States, and you're going to take some of your UK flags, fly over to London, sell them, and then take all the money you make from selling them and go have a bunch of beers at the pub. So the idea is that we want to be able to calculate, based on the number of flags that you sell and the current exchange rate, how many beers you'll be able to drink. Okay, so that's the high level, and we're going to look at the detailed spec right here. So we're going to need to prompt the user for the current dollar to pound exchange rate, right? So we're going to be taking flags over with us that we know the price of them in dollars. We sell them in dollars in the US. We need to know how much to charge for them in the UK. So just as a quick reference point, I'm going to Google dollar to pound. We get the dollar to pound exchange rate. 1 US dollar is worth 68 pence, 0.68 British pounds. You can see that that exchange rate has gone up and down quite a bit over the last couple of years, and is probably going to be even more unstable as the Brexit vote comes up. So we're going to need the exchange rate. We're going to prompt the user for the exchange rate, since that changes so frequently. And we're also going to prompt the user for the number of flags that you expect to sell. Maybe some of them get caught up in customs. You take 1,000 flags with you, but you only get to sell 500. So that's another thing that our program should take as input, the number of flags that you're able to sell. There are going to be two other costs that we need to know. We need to know how much a pint costs, right? If we're going to buy beers with the money we make at the end, we need to calculate how many beers we can buy. We need to know how much a beer costs. A pint of ale in London, just a quick internet search showed that, according to one study, the average cost of a pint in London was £3.79. And the other fixed cost that's going to be built into our program will be the cost of a flag in dollars. So we know how much they cost in the US. They're going to cost $3 in the US, and that's just going to be a built-in input to our program. We won't have to prompt the user for that. That'll just be built into a variable that we hard code. All right, and then the last piece of specification for this program is going to be that we're going to need to print out the number of pints that we'll be able to afford after selling our flags. Okay, so let's get to work. I'm going to do this work on the Studio 3 page. This is Chapter 3's Studio page. The studio is called Donuts. I'm going to pull up the Scratch editor for this page and just do my work here. These Scratch editors, actually, let me refresh the page. I just had made some changes to that Scratch editor that were lingering. There we go. That looks better. These Scratch editors they are built into every page of the book, and you can always go in and code here and then save your code into the Scratch editor. So I'm just going to do this on the Studio page, since it's code for the pre-studio, which goes along with the studio. All right, so let's just add some comments to see what we need to do first. I'm going to remind myself of what that might be. I need to prompt the user for a couple of pieces of information: the current dollar to pound exchange rate and the number of flags they expect to sell. So the first thing to do will be prompt user for dollar to pound exchange rate. After that, I need to prompt the user for number of flags to be sold. All right. I'm going to have the fixed cost of a pint in pounds and a flag in dollars built in. Fixed amounts, cost of pint, cost of flag in dollars. Let's see, and then I'm going to need to print out the number of pints that I'll be able to afford. Print number of pints. Before I do that, I need to actually calculate them too. So I'm not just going to get the number of pints straight away. I'm going to have to do some calculation there. So calculate number of pints we can afford. Okay, so I'm just going to save my code. All right, so let's see. Let's go ahead and start coding here. Now we've got an outline of our program in place. Prompt the user for dollar to pound exchange rate. We're going to use the input function here, input current dollar to pound exchange rate. Exchange rate. There we go. There we go. And I'm going to need to store that in a variable. So I'm going to say that's pounds in, or say I'm going to call this dollars per pound. Pounds per dollar. That's the right direction. Pounds per dollar. So in the example of current exchange rate, the user would input 0.68 for the number of pounds per US dollar. Okay. I'm going to then need to do the number of flags. So number flags is going to be equal to input flags to be sold. All right, and so now we've got those two inputs. I'm just going to go ahead and save, and I'm going to go ahead and just run my code just to make sure I haven't made any silly mistakes yet. So at this point, just putting in some inputs. Notice we didn't get any output, but that's expected. We haven't added any print statements to our code. We just wanted to make sure that those inputs went in properly, and since we didn't get any error messages, it appears that they did. So one more thing I need to do before I can go ahead down here and start doing some more work is these are going to be numbers. We just saw that I just put in 0.68 for pounds per dollar, and I think I put in 500 for the number of flags. Remember that the input function gives you back strings, right? So I'm going to need to be dealing with numbers if I'm going to use these in a calculation. So let me go ahead and convert these inputs to the proper data type. So pounds per dollar, I should be able to take in decimal points as a number there. We just saw we have 0.68 as the current exchange rate, so I need to make that a float. For number of flags, num flags, that should be an integer, right? It really doesn't make sense to have half of a flag or a third of a flag. So num flags equals int of num flags. And so we've got those converted. Going to go ahead and save there. Okay. So let's go ahead and create our fixed amount variables. I'm going to kind of try to keep the same naming scheme as I have up here, just for consistency. I have pounds per dollar. So here I want to put the cost of a pint, and so I'm just going to say pounds per pint. And we saw, I think that was $3.79. Let me check the specification. That's $3.79. Yep, 3.79. And then I also have the cost of a flag in dollars. So that's dollars per flag using that naming scheme. And that's equal to $3 is the cost of a flag before we cross the Atlantic. Okay, so now I've got 4 different numeric variables that I'm all going to use in my calculation. I've got pounds per dollar, num flags, pounds per pint, and dollars per flag. So I'm going to need to calculate the number of pints we can afford. This is going to take multiple steps for us here. So let's kind of break down and think about how we're going to get to the number of pints we can afford. Well, first I probably need to know how much money I'm going to take in by selling all these flags, right? So calculate the amount of pounds. If I had the pound symbol, I would use that in there, but I don't on my keyboard. Amount of pounds we take in from sales. And that's going to give us the total amount of money we make, and from that total amount of money I can then calculate the number of pints. And that's just actually kind of duplicating that comment. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. So I've got 2 steps here now in this calculation. First I need to calculate the total amount of money we make from selling our flags. Actually, before even we do that, if I try to calculate this number, I'm going to run into a problem really quickly, right? I want to calculate the amount of money I make from selling flags, but I don't know how much a flag costs in pounds yet, right? I know how much a flag costs in dollars, but I don't know how much it costs in pounds. So calculate cost of flag in pounds. So I'm going to need to do these 3 steps. Once I have that cost, I should be able to calculate the amount of money we can make, and then from that, the number of pints. So the cost of a flag in pounds, this is probably the trickiest conversion or calculation, just because it's not obvious what it should be maybe right away. So we've got the variables that we're going to need to use. I'm going to say pounds per flag is equal to what? Well, I've got 2 variables that I'm probably going to need to use. I'm probably going to need to use this exchange rate, this pounds per dollar, and I'm probably going to need to use the cost of a flag in dollars, right? But do I multiply or do I divide? That's the big question. Well, let's think of it this way. If your flag was $1, if it cost $1 US, and the exchange rate was 0.68, then you would have 0.68 to $1. You would get that by multiplying 1 times 0.68, right? And that would give you 68 pence, 0.68 pounds as the cost of a flag in pounds. That would be correct, right? So that tells me I'm going to multiply. I'm going to take the cost of a flag in dollars per flag, and multiply by pounds per dollar. If you're keeping track of your units here, as you did in chemistry, you would see that then cancels out correctly, and we get pounds per flag. Okay. Now we need to know the amount of pounds we take in from sales. So I've got, we're going to call that revenue. That's the revenue we bring in from selling our flags. That's going to be the number of flags that we have that we can sell times the cost of each flag. Right? That one's actually a little simpler to envision. All right? And then the number of pints we can afford, that's going to be the amount of money we take in, which we just calculated in the revenue variable, divided by the cost of, the cost of a pint, rather, pounds per pint. Does that look right? Yeah, that looks right. Great. And then we just need to close up by printing a message here. You can afford. I'm going to use the fancy comma-separated version of the print function. And just print out a message there. All right, so let's go ahead and save. It's been a while since I ran this, so hopefully I don't have any errors. Would have been a good idea to kind of run that once or twice while I added all those lines of code. But let's just go ahead and see how we do. If we have some errors, we'll fix them. 0.68. And I'm going to say we've got 500 flags. And great, so I got an output message with a number. All right, so a few things here to talk about. One is, how do I know that's the right number? So let's do that later. I'm first here going to focus on this number itself, right? This number, 269.1292, might be the right number, might not, but the formatting of that isn't great, right? I can't really buy a portion of a beer at a pub. I can only buy a full beer. So I've got this float because all of the numbers I've been dealing with, most of them at least so far, are floats, but I really want to deal with an integer at this point. So I'm going to go ahead and convert number of pints to an integer. Just because I can't have a portion of a pint of beer. So let's run this again, see what happens. 0.68, 500. There we go. That looks a lot better. That looks a lot better. Okay, so now I have my code running. I have it looking nicely formatted. How do I know that I have the right numeric answer here? Well, this in general, it's some way you can go back and check your calculations and these formulas by hand if you like. One good way to do it as a programmer, and just a general good practice as a programmer when you're testing your code, is to think about edge cases. And an edge case just means that it's a case that is kind of not your average middle of the road case, but it's special for whatever reason. So one thing that I should know, that if I don't sell any flags, I shouldn't be able to buy any beers. So if I run my program with 0 as the number of flags, I should get 0 as the number of pints. Let's just test that that works. Okay, so put in my exchange rate of 0.68. I'm going to sell 0 flags. and it says I can afford 0 pints. That's great. That's exactly what I would hope would happen. So that's something to give us confidence that our code is working properly. Let's take a few more edge cases, right? What if I sell 1 flag? What would we expect to happen? So let's just think about this for a second before we actually run the code. And I'm just going to, well, canceled out of that, so it created an error, but we can ignore that for now. That error was just because I didn't provide any input. Let's think about this before we run the code. We want to think about how many flags am I going to be able to buy how many beers am I going to be able to buy if I sell only 1 flag, okay? A flag costs $3, right? And if we use the exchange rate of 0.68, how many pounds should a flag cost? Well, 0.68 is about 2/3, right? 0.6666 repeating is 2/3. That's pretty close to 2/3. So that tells you that since we're multiplying to convert from dollars to pound, that if it's $3 per flag, and a pound is about 2/3, or a dollar is about 2/3 of a pound, I should get about 2, or 2/3 of 3, as the pounds per flag. That's what that should be here. So just to kind of put that in writing here, I'll just kind of put some scratch stuff here. The pounds per flag will be equal to dollars per flag, which is 3 times 2/3, which is roughly the pounds per dollar, in a kind of hand wavy kind of way. And if I do that, that number equals what? That equals 2. So roughly 2. Now that's just, it's not going to be the exact answer. That's not going to be the exact cost of a flag in pounds, but it's going to be pretty close. So if I have 1 flag to sell and it's of roughly 2 pounds, and a beer costs more than 3 pounds, between 3 and 4, I'm not going to be able to buy any beers if I sell 1 flag. I'm going to need to sell at least 2. So let's make sure that our code works correctly in that scenario. So 0.68 is the exchange rate. Flags to be sold, 1. And I get 0. That's good. Okay, so that said, I got 0 because a flag costs roughly 2 pounds. If I sell 2, I'll have roughly 4 pounds, which is going to be a little bit more than the cost of a beer. So I would expect that if I run this same exchange rate and sell 2 flags, I should get 1 beer back. And sure enough, I do. Great. So these are all things to indicate that these edge cases are ways that I can give confidence in myself that I've done the right calculations. Let's do one more edge case. What if our exchange rate was 1? Okay, so that would mean that a dollar was worth the same as a pound. So if I sell my flags for $3 in the US, I would sell them for 3 pounds in the UK. Okay, so if I sold only 1 flag for 3 pounds, a pint still costs more than that. I should still get 0. Okay, that's correct. If the exchange rate is $1 per pound and I sell 2 flags, I should get at least 1 pint. That's great. And then one more edge case, dollar to pound exchange rate. Well, actually, I'm not going to try to do that. I was going to do a fancy one with the calculation in my head, but I don't want to try that. Let's just go back to our main case, 500, and we'll leave it there. So you can I've checked this multiple times. You can check that these calculations, if you did them by hand or got a calculator out and ran a bunch of different scenarios, you would see these calculations are indeed correct. So this is our correct code. So I'm going to hit save one more time. I'm just going to kind of scan my code, make sure it looks clean, no extra comments. We kind of kept it clean as we went, so that's great. So this is the answer to our pre-studio. All right, so the studio, which you can now dig into on your own, let's just kind of walk through that specification. So it's a similar kind of calculation involving selling things and having different rates and numbers involved. Imagine that there's a new donut shop that's going to open up in the Del Mar Loop here in St. Louis, and it's a creative, new, fancy, sort of hipster donut shop, and it has these 3 kind of innovations. They only offer 1 donut per day, just a single donut. So we're going to write a program that's going to allow people to take donut orders. There's only 1 donut they can select, so we're not going to have to deal with giving people options for the number of donuts they need to select. The customer has the option to order a portion of a donut, so they can order 1.7 donuts or 2.3 donuts or half a donut. All right, so it gives them some flexibility there. So that tells us something about the input we're going to need to take into our program. And then we also have a pay what you want model. So they're going to get a suggested price for the donut, but they can decide to pay whatever they like. So this is something that's happened in actual real life. The Panera store in Clayton lets people pay what they like for their items. And so if you're down in your luck and you don't have much money that day, you can pay a little bit less than the suggested price. If you want to pay it forward, you can pay more than the suggested price. All right, so our app is going to be basically an order taking calculator for the donut shop. We're going to ask the user how many donuts they want to buy, how much they want to pay per donut, and then tell them the total cost of their order, incorporating sales tax. So we've kind of enumerated those items here. The sales tax is supposed to be 5%. Don't forget to include that in your code. And here's kind of the example output of our program. So there's a short welcome message. You can kind of customize this as you like. You don't have to do the exact language we use here. There's a short welcome message. We tell the user what the daily special is. You can make up the daily special. It can be whatever you like, but you should tell the user what the donut is that day. That way they can know if they like it and they want to order more or less. And then so once they have that information, we ask them how many they would like to order. So remember that 3 arrows just means that is the input that the user is typing in to the program. It doesn't mean you need to print out 3 arrows or do anything like that. That's just signifying that when we prompt them with how many would you like, they're going to type in this specific example, 3.33333. How much would you like to pay per donut? We're going to ask them that question and give them the suggested price, which again, you can change that and make that up however you like. And then we're going to take in their answer. In this example, the user types in 2.5 as the dollars and cents. They want to pay $2.50 per donut. And then we do the calculation. After tax, the total is $8.74999.125. Okay, so that includes tax, the tax 5%. So don't forget that. A couple of things here. Don't worry about formatting that dollar amount there. Don't worry about that. We don't have all the tools at our disposal yet to format outputs like that and truncate that to just 2 decimal places like you normally would do for a sales application. That's okay. And notice that your specific answer could be slightly different just by somewhere down at the end. There's some imprecision in doing floating point calculations within a computer, and we may talk about that at some point more in the class. But if you get 8.74999.124 or something like that, don't worry about it too much. You've basically got the right answer for these specific input numbers. Okay, so customize that as you like, as long as you're following the specification to do those things. All right, there's Studio 3. Have at it.